Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we're in Joshua chapter number 12. Let's get started.
All right, Joshua chapter number 12. I want you to be careful when you read through chapters like this, because sometimes when we read through chapters in the Bible that don't necessarily tell stories anymore, they're telling details, that we tend to assume that these require a little bit less of our attention. But I want you to just understand, God never wastes a single word in all of His Bible. So everything matters. Now let me tell you why. I want to just kind of point out some things that's happening here. Inside chapter number 12, it's going to list off a lot of kings that the Israelites defeated as they moved into the promised land. As a matter of fact, 33 kings are listed in this chapter. Whenever you go to, do what?
31.
That's right, 31. Now there's some other guys also mentioned, but these defeats are kind of happening one after the other. So when you look at verses like verse 2, it says, from the middle of the river, even as far as the river Jabbok. When it says the river Jabbok in that story, that's the river that Jacob had to cross over originally. Do you remember the story in the book of Genesis where Jacob is moving back across the river? He's going to meet Esau. He hears Esau's coming and he's afraid. So he sends half of his group before and half of his group behind. And that night that Jacob is on the river, he wrestles with God. Do you remember that story? That's the same river. So where he is wrestling with God, remember this is now it's a place not of wrestling but a place of victory, because the patriarchs were the kind of the head daddies of the nation. So there was Abraham, there was Isaac, and there was who? Jacob. Jacob's name at that point was changed to what? Israel. And the name of this nation is what?
The
Israel. So the children of Israel are called the Israelites. The Israelites. That's right. So listen, see how God has changed this from a place of battle now to a place of victory, and He's giving them a home. But I want you to notice another connection here. In verse 3, it says, in the eastern Jordan plain from the river of Chinneroth, or from the sea of Chinneroth. Now, in Israel, there's only one sea. So there's the Mediterranean Sea to the left. That's where the coastline is. But the only real sea in the nation, the one they're talking about here, is not really a sea. They would call it a sea. We would call it more of a lake.
Dead Sea.
The what?
Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea is in the south. This one is kind of in the middle. Think of the place where most of Jesus's ministry took place.
The Jordan
River and the Sea of Galilee.
So
the Sea of Chinneroth is the Sea of Galilee. So now we're making connections to Jacob in the past, and now it's setting the stage for the work of Jesus in the New Testament. Notice also in verse 6, it says, these Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel had conquered, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, had given it as a possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. So remember, Joshua, when he's talking about Moses here, he's not saying Moses, the giver of the Ten Commandments, Moses, the lawgiver, Moses, the leader, Moses, the guy who parted the Red Sea. When they think about Moses, the number one distinguishing factor in Moses' life was he was what? The servant of the Lord. So just remember, all of us will be remembered for something. So it looks like there's a lot of details in here, and there are. But I don't want you to like make this a second class kind of scripture where there's details here, not stories, and you go, I didn't really get anything from it today. Here's why all of this is here. Because chapter 12 is given so that future generations of Israelites would be reminded that the conquest of the land and coming out of Egypt and the works of God, they're not fairy tales. Like, we have so much of this information because it's not a fairy tale, it's not a myth, it's actual history. God really did do these things. Now, Jax, what are some of the takeaways you and I had as we came away from this?
All right, so coming away from this, so it was really a lot of details to take in because it's a lot that happened. So like 31 different times, it lists a different king, and then it says one. So right there, that's the allotments of land that Joshua is splitting up. But there's something interesting about where this land is, and we see that in verse 7 and verse 8. It says, Joshua and the Israelites struck down the following kings of the land beyond the Jordan to the west, from Baal-Gad to the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which ascends towards Seir. Joshua gave their land as an inheritance to the tribes of Israel according to their allotments: the hill country, the Judean foothills, the Arabah, the slopes, the wilderness, and the Negev, and the lands of the Hethites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites.
Okay, all of that is exciting, by the way, right?
Right.
Okay, talk about what we found in there.
All right. So right here, my takeaway comes from this part where it says the hill country and the foothills. So right there, mountains and valleys. So back then, there would be all these groups of people, and they would have their own made-up gods, and they would make up the gods based off of their surroundings. So, like, if they lived by the sea, then they would worship their god of the sea. But
All right, hey, let me give you an example there. So he says if they lived by the sea, they would worship a god of the sea. So remember in the Old Testament, the bad guys of the Old Testament, the Philistines, like Goliath was a Philistine. They worshipped a god called Dagon. So they were seafaring people. So the god that they worshiped was a merman. His name was Dagon. He had the body of a man, but he had the tail of a fish. And so he's half man, half fish. So here's the big question. If you're a Philistine and you're fighting near the water and you serve a god of the water, do you think you can win?
yes.
Okay, but if you serve a god of the water and your battle takes place in the desert, do you think you're going to win that one?
No.
So they're very superstitious. All right. So what do we get?
All right. But this is all land the Israelites conquered under God. So for them to conquer all of these lands in different areas, that proves God isn't just a God of one place or another. God is the God of everything and everywhere.
That's right. So this is not a God moving in the Israelites into the promised land. This is not a local idol. This is not a local deity that these little city-states are worshiping. He is not a God that's imprisoned in the valleys or up on the mountains or in the hills or by the sea. There is no territory that is outside of his territory. Why? Because he's not a local deity. He is the maker of heaven and earth. And what we need to kind of take away from that is, as the Lord is moving his people into this land, remember, whose land is it? It's his land. The whole world is his. He owns everything. And he is letting them inherit from their father. He's letting them inherit the land. And what this means is that you will never go anywhere that God is not already fully in charge. Now, what's the Bible verse that all of this proves? Remember Joshua 1:9? Have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you
Wherever you go.
wherever you go. In the mountains, in the valleys, in the hills, by the sea, in the desert, in the wilderness, in the cities. He is there. Why? Because he is God. And by the way, he is also in the details. So enjoy these chapters. God has not wasted a single word. See you next time.
Bye.